Greetings, imagination connoisseurs and friends all over the world. Welcome to this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. It is I, your master of ceremonies, the sanctimoniously notorious Robert Meyer Burnett, here for this Robservations live chat number 134. My God, it's June 1st. Where does the time go? We will all be dead soon. I don't know. It goes a long way. I mean, it goes far away, long way. I'm enjoying myself. What can I say? Today's a big day here in the household. My girlfriend Elizabeth is having a big art show here in Pasadena. Local artists all open their homes if they have home studios, or their studios if they don't have home studios. She has a home studio here, and people are coming around from all over the city to see her paintings. And why I find it exciting is that she and I are collaborating on a children's book. And you can see, I just tweeted out two of her paintings from the children's book. The children's book is called The Girl Who Could See the Forest Through the Trees. And it's inspired by a lot of things. It's got a little bit of a Ridley Scott's Legend in there. Neil Gaiman's work inspired it all. But I did tweet two of her paintings. She's working on them now. I think there's going to be 24 of her paintings total in the book, including the cover, which I believe the painting she's working on now, which is The Girl Who Could See the Forest Through the Trees, her face. I love her artwork. There's a lot of whimsy in it. She was trained as a fine artist. That's not her day job. She also has her own salon. She ran her own salon in Old Town Pasadena, and then she moved it into our house as well. So she has her own salon here. If you ever want to get a haircut, you can come to Pasadena and get your haircut. Anyway, welcome all of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome to this chat. Today, my friends, is the 35th anniversary of the release of Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, which came out in 1984. The Search for Spock marked Leonard Nimoy's debut as a feature director. It is, it's a movie. Actually, we did an Inglorious Treksperts podcast with Rafe Needleman, which just dropped today. So if you've ever heard or haven't heard our Inglorious Treksperts podcast, we review or talk about Star Trek 3 today. I believe we were a little harsh. I'm not a big fan of the movie. I thought because it was Leonard Nimoy's directorial debut, it was a little, shall we say, sophomoric, even though you'd normally say that about his second feature. But there's obviously some great moments to be had in Star Trek 3, but I'm going to tell you a story. For me, it's sort of a Hollywood story. So when I was growing up in Seattle, we used to have a science fiction convention called NorwestCon, because we're in the Pacific Northwest. And it was mostly a literary convention, but there was a media component to it. But I went every year, usually by myself. And when I was there I don't remember when NorwestCon was. I don't know if it was in late 83 or the beginning of 84, but there was a publicist there from Paramount Pictures named Eddie Egan, who I believe still works in the business even today. He does different things now, I would imagine, but there's the dogs. There's Gilbert and then Tallulah. They don't quite know what's going on. I already gave them cookies this morning, so the gruesome twosome. But so Eddie Egan was there making a presentation for Star Trek 3, and I went up and spoke to him afterwards. So in 84, I was probably, at this point, I was probably still 16, maybe 16. Anyway, I went and talked to him, and he actually said to me, he said, listen, if you give me your address, and he'd come up from California, I will make sure that when they have a publicity screening here in Seattle, that you will get a ticket to go see the movie. And I'm like, sure. Why would you do that? I'm like, okay. I gave him my address, and lo and behold, months later, I did in fact receive an all media screening ticket for the first screening of Star Trek 3 in Seattle, which was pretty cool. For someone like, I believe it was at the Lewis and Clark Cinemas, actually, which I had to drive a bit of a ways to get to. But the point of that story is that sometimes you meet people in Hollywood that can be inspirational and do right by you. There was no reason why he had to send me that ticket, nor that he would even remember. I mean, he went back to California and was working for Paramount as a publicist. He really didn't need to do that, but he did do that. And that's sort of been my experience with a lot of people that I've actually met in Hollywood. I try and do that. A lot of the times I flake because there's so many people. I meet so many people and I'm doing so many different things. But I do keep that in the back of my mind because I think it's a pretty great story that somebody actually did that. You know, somebody did what they said they were going to do and didn't have to. It didn't. He didn't make any money off it, but he did in fact send me the pass, and I went and saw Star Trek 3. Now, what was interesting about Star Trek 3, of course, the only reason it got made was they had to entice Leonard Nimoy to come back from dying in the previous film, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which had come out in '82. And that movie was very, very successful because they, of course, brought in Harv Bennett. And unlike Star Trek: The Motion Picture, they made Star Trek 3 with the television division of Paramount. I mean, they had done it with Star Trek 2 as well. So when they made Star Trek 2, because of the costs of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, they handed over the reins to Harv Bennett, the television department of Paramount, and they basically made it under the auspices of the television division. And Star Trek 2, you went from a movie that it had a reported budget of $44 million, which really isn't fair because Star Trek: The Motion Picture had all of the development costs from the aborted Planet of the Titans film, the Star Trek 2 television series. All of those were wrapped up. The Star Trek Phase 2 series were wrapped up into the budget of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And of course, they had to fire Robert Abel and Associates, which was the first Robert Abel and Associates, the first effects team. So Star Trek: The Motion Picture cost a lot of money. So Gene Roddenberry sort of pushed aside. Harv Bennett took over. And I think of all of the Star Trek movies, Star Trek 3 really betrays its television origins. Aside from ILM's wonderful effects work, we got to see Space Dock. We were introduced to the USS Grissom. We were introduced to the USS Excelsior, which later played a big part in Star Trek lore, including becoming the ship that Captain Sulu captained. And there was a lot of stuff that was introduced in Star Trek 2. We saw the merchant vessel, and I think one of the most I don't know what you'd call it, but I would say it was controversial. And that was the introduction of the Klingon bird of prey. Now, we talk about this on the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, but I had actually read Harv Bennett's original story treatment for what was at one time called Star Trek 3: Return to Genesis. Now, I loved the story treatment for Star Trek 3. In this story treatment, it was essentially the same story, but it was much bigger in scope. The Vulcans were going to secede from the Federation. They were horrified with the revelation of the Genesis device, the detonation of the Genesis torpedo in the Mutara Nebula, and the creation of the Genesis planet. That kind of monstrous weapon that was developed in secret became a galactic controversy, as we later find out in the movies. And Vulcan was in a tizzy about this and thought it was monstrous and wanted to secede from the Federation in the script. So when Kirk they go back to Vulcan, and Vulcan's a mess. And Kirk confronts Sarek on Vulcan and finds out about the Katra and all of that, and that they should go back and retrieve Spock's body. But the biggest change was that there were no Klingons in this. The original Star Trek 3: Return to Genesis storyline had Romulans in it. And Romulans had snuck across the neutral zone, or I don't know where the Mutara Nebula was, or where in this treatment. The Genesis planet, because it was designed to be this way, was rich in dilithium. So the Romulans had snuck across space, Federation space, and had set up a mining operation on the Genesis planet, not knowing that it was going to come apart. And they were confronting feral Spock, who was picking off the Romulans one by one. Well, that's why it was called a bird of prey. It was a Romulan bird of prey. And as much as I loved Leonard Nimoy, and as much as an erudite man, he was a very erudite guy. Actors. This is one of the reasons that Jean-Luc Picard, the idea that Patrick Stewart is very much involved in the development of the Picard series, always gives me pause. Actors believe it or not, are not up on the lore of the TV shows that they're in. They read the scripts, they say their lines, and they go home. They're not poring over tech manuals. They're not thinking about what's the continuity. And they're always, because they have to, they're thinking about how they relate or how they are going to be represented in these films, and what is their character going to get to do. And they want their character to be as appealing and as fun as possible. So I am willing to bet you that influence. I think that the Picard series, without knowing anything about it, is going to be heavily influenced by Logan. I really believe that. And we're going to see a Jean-Luc Picard that is, of course, not canonical Picard, but is part of this new Prime Universe Picard. So there'll be ties, but it's not canonical Jean-Luc Picard. Anyway, so Leonard Nimoy was enticed to come back to play Spock again, but mostly to direct. He wanted to direct. He leveraged his position, and I thought smartly. But unfortunately, they didn't have the kind of budget they needed to realize on I think a movie budget. We of course we go back, we climb the steps of Mount Seleia in Star Trek 3, and it looks like you're in an indoor set from the 60s television series. And indeed you are. The bar in that McCoy goes to try and book passage to the Genesis system. I mean, it looks like they put up a few walls and got a few extras. You can even see the makeup seams and the bald head. Your planet, welcome, that guy. And the film, to me, it's a dichotomy. There are wonderful moments in it, but it's sort of betrayed by its budget and Leonard Nimoy's, again, I would say, lack a less sophisticated approach. The Klingons are very cartoonish. As much as I enjoy Christopher Lloyd, Cruz is a very cartoonish character with his space dog and all of that. And John Larroquette from Night Court, John Larroquette, and who did the opening narration. Here's a bit of trivia. What famous horror film from the mid-70s did John Larroquette provide the opening narration to? Any takers? That's right. I don't know if anybody took it. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. So Star Trek 3 was a movie that it's likable, but of course, Kirstie Alley wouldn't come back to play Saavik for various reasons. And so we had Robin Curtis, who I actually thought was a little wooden and stiff, but David is dead. But I like the way she looked as Saavik. It was just so strange because Kirstie Alley, the Saavik character, is half Romulan and half Vulcan. You don't really get that in the film. But of course, if you read Vonda McIntyre's novelization, you did. So I really enjoyed Star Trek 3, kind of. When I saw it, of course, I liked it, and it is very moving at the end, and the stealing the Enterprise sequence is great. There's a lot of great lines. Mr. Adventure, this is damn irregular. Get in the closet. I thought all the secondary characters had some good material to work with. George Takei did, certainly as Sulu, and Nichelle Nichols did. All our hopes. There's some great acting from the principals in the movie. A lot of Shatner stuff is a little over the top. You Klingon bastard, you've killed my son. All of those things. But I think now, looking back, despite all of its faults, and it's still an enjoyable film. And it's probably the Star Trek movie I actually, believe it or not, watch the least. Yeah, I even watch Final Frontier more than Star Trek 3, I suppose, just because I marvel at it's on one hand, it's a really good movie that is just full of lots of ineptitude. But I do like the photography. But yeah, so Star Trek 3, I think, a mid-range entry into the Star Trek film pantheon. But looking back, it's amazing to me. The movie's 35 years old today. I can't believe that. And what was Chekhov wearing? His pink page boy outfit? I don't know. Little drummer boy. I don't know what you'd call it. Cossack era czarist school kid. I don't know. But it was a movie that, at the time, I think after Star Trek the Motion Picture and after Star Trek 2 was a little bit of a disappointment to me because of its lack of scope. But ultimately, an enjoyable film that I think you can look at now. It looks to me like it was made 20 years before Star Trek the Motion Picture and Star Trek 2 in a way, aside from the visual effects. ILM's visual effects are first rate. It was the last time we got ILM's A-Team in a Star Trek movie, I think, until maybe First Contact. Because when you get into Star Trek 4, whoosh, the visual effects in that film were a step down, but that was because ILM was so damn busy. You basically had the B team. There's a lot of shaky matte work in Star Trek 4. But anyway, it's interesting. It's always nice to remember the passage of time talking about movies and when they came out. So we can talk about more of that. But on to the letters. I'm going to read once again the letters that I received from all of you. Let's see. I'm going to put my glasses on today. So, hey, Rob, this is Christopher. Oh, by the way, this comes from Christopher Collins. Hey, Rob, this is Christopher. I've been listening to you and discovered you through Collider back in 2015 because of Chris Stuckman's film reviews. I really like Chris Stuckman's film reviews. I like getting Stuckmanized. He made the big video collaboration about how to become a film critic and what does it mean to be a film critic. And it included people that are regulars on the Schmoes Know and big Star Trek and La La Land film fans, Scott Mantz. Scott Mantz. I love Scott. As well as Jeremy Johns. I love Jeremy Johns. He has the same kind of obsession with hot toys as I do. All of which I had no idea who they were or the significance in the film industry until I saw Chris Stuckman's video. But the one video that really got me to Collider was the film review for Batman v Superman, because that was a film where I was not sure if I should see it in theaters. Then everyone had mixed feelings in the review, but strangely, the one thing that everyone was most concerned about, based upon the trailers being the interpretation of Batman, was the one thing I found the most interesting, and everyone liked how he was portrayed. I still have not seen the film because it was so mixed. I've only seen the ending on YouTube with Wonder Woman because everyone kept saying that was the best part, and the email sequence introducing the Justice League, because I felt those are the big scenes I should see before I went to see Wonder Woman in theaters and seeing Justice League. My question is it bad that we do not see a film because of the film reviews on that film? Is it bad that we can find this information so quickly now on the internet and that it makes audiences so they will not take risks on seeing a film based upon what audiences will say? Or is it a good thing, as say in the case of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, where audiences want to go in as quickly as possible to see a film so that they are not influenced by word of mouth or reviews on a film? Well, Chris, I love this letter, and I want to thank you for it. Here's a truism in life. I'm going to give you a Burnett axiom. The first Burnett axiom I have is never put your universe before your characters. That's a Burnett axiom, or the story. The second Burnett axiom is no matter how much advanced information you might know about a film, no matter how many reviews you read, no matter what your friends tell you about a movie, nothing comes close to the experience of actually sitting down in a theater and watching that film. I have learned this over the course of my life. Everything about a movie, the way music works with scenes, what do they do with the opening logo, how the film is edited, the way it's going to make you feel. Sorry, there's a lot of noise in the background because there's people here at the art show in the room next door. Nothing, no matter what you know, no matter what you've read about a movie, can compare to seeing a film. It's always a different experience than what you might have previously thought. Always, without exception. And I would say, first of all, watch Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Watch it because there's a lot in it that I love. And please watch the Ultimate Cut. The Ultimate Cut is significantly better than the theatrical version. But first of all, if you like Man of Steel, the opening of Batman v Superman is tremendous. It's a man on the street view of what's happening with the battle between Superman and Zod from the end of Man of Steel. And you meet Bruce Wayne. You meet Ben Affleck's version of Bruce Wayne. It is an incredible sequence. And look, I think Batman v Superman is overstuffed. It's both overstuffed and underdeveloped across the board. There's a lot of stupid stuff in the movie, like why is Gotham City and Metropolis across the bay from one another or across a body of water? I think that's really stupid. I mean, I've always thought, a lot of people would say that both Metropolis and Gotham City are based in New York, or based on New York, and I would say that's probably true. But in the DC universe, I always thought of Metropolis as New York and Chicago as Gotham. hence Chicago mobs of the 20s, Al Capone and all that. That's where Batman's rogues gallery sort of comes from, even though that's not true. It is, but in my own mind, Gotham is Chicago in the DC universe, and Metropolis is New York City. Not in this movie. There is a lot to love about Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. There is, whether you like Zack Snyder's films or not, he definitely casts a spell. But there's a lot of things in Batman v Superman that, Batman with his guns on the Batmobile, and there's a lot of really ridiculous stuff, and it's a little infantile. However, there's a lot of really great stuff in the movie too. And it really goes for it. I mean, I don't know why we needed to see the end of The Dark Knight Rises played out in a film, along with Doomsday mashed into one thing. But, Batman v Superman is not a train wreck. It's not horrible. There's a lot of really interesting stuff. I really like Affleck's portrayal of Batman and Bruce Wayne. I really like meeting Diana Prince in the movie. You should watch the film. And I think this goes for everyone. If you've heard a movie is bad, I mean, there are movies that are indeed universally bad, but if you're interested in a film and you've heard it's not as good or worse than you might have hoped, but if you still have an interest in it, my advice is to always go see that movie, because there are things in it that will delight you, things in it that will surprise you. It might turn out to be a monumental disappointment, but nothing will ever take away from the experience of seeing a film, because there's so much in every movie that you watch that's worth seeing, even if it doesn't work. There's delights to be had. Maybe a movie has a great score, but it's a terrible film. Maybe there's some good performances. Maybe there's some sequences that'll leave a mark on you. You never know. Or movies like Catwoman that are just so unbelievably bad that you watch them and marvel, and you realize, well, that's not something I would want to do again or see again. And why did they make that film? But you know what? Sharon Stone's in Catwoman, so I'll watch it. Anyway, I want to thank you for that letter. I thought it was a great letter. And by the way, report back. Please go watch Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and watch the Ultimate Cut. It's out on Blu-ray, and boy, does it look good. 4K too, I think. This next letter comes from Sean Reed. Hi, Rob. I've been reminiscing about the old shows I used to watch growing up. As a child of the 80s, I had Hasselhoff and Knight Rider, Jan Michael Vincent and Airwolf. They were my personal favorites. In the subject of verisimilitude, sorry if I misspelled that, what were your views on these shows? Would there be a chance, if done right, they could be done in today's era? Because I'd love for an Airwolf reboot. I mean, I know it would be hard to push the tech of a helicopter, but look at what they were doing back then. In the original, it could travel at Mach 1.5. It had stealth capabilities, radar jamming, multitudes of offensive weapons. I'm sure someone with a creative mind could do it justice. Throw in the weekly concepts of spy-like missions, unofficial for the U.S. government, and I'd be on board. Anyway, those are my random thoughts today as I'm enjoying Robservations Chat 133 and hopefully going to see Godzilla soon. I'll end this letter now, and I'll wish you and the rest of the Post-Geek Singularity community a wonderful weekend. Sean, another great letter. I mean, could they do an Airwolf show? I think everybody who didn't love Airwolf, I was a Blue Thunder man myself. I thought, Airwolf did look more like a spaceship. It was more sleek, but there was something about the Blue Thunder that I loved. And many people don't remember there was also it was short-lived, but there was a Blue Thunder television series. But I really adore John Badham's Blue Thunder film from 1983. John Badham had a double header in 1983. He had made War Games and he made Blue Thunder in the same year. Go John Badham. He, of course, was the director of Dracula with Frank Langella and also Saturday Night Fever. But I really enjoyed Blue Thunder. But here's the thing. In our with our technology now, it could be interesting to have, a helicopter that could go off on these covert missions. And the same thing, I guess, is true of Knight Rider. But I think now, looking back, with the technology, with drone technology and with all of our surveillance technology now, you look back on Knight Rider and the fact that you have a talking car and we've got now Alexa in every room of our house. These shows are sort of quaint. I think they might be part of an era that is bygone. But I think the concept behind having some kind of an aircraft and a character, I don't know who the equivalent of Jan Michael Vincent is, but an aircraft that rights wrongs or people going around, there's always an irresistible uh, um, there's always irresistible stories you could build around that. I mean, personally, I was waiting for a reboot of BJ and the Bear, but I just don't know. There are certain shows and technology, and they're just products of their time. But again, it always comes down to, is it a great story, well told? And I do believe that there is a possibility of rebooting or coming up with a new way. Look at what they did with Jumanji. The Jumanji franchise, it went from board game to video game, and they were able to come up with a really interesting concept. And it worked, and it was a big success. What you need is the right producer, you need creativity, and it can be done, I think. I think it can be done. So thanks for writing in. I thought a great letter. And as for verisimilitude, it's tough. I mean, I think when it comes to something like Airwolf, they did pretty good on their television budget. There was a lot of stock footage they would reuse. It's going to be interesting to see Top Gun. Can Top Gun, I mean, when Top Gun 2 comes out next year, we're looking at, what is that, 34 years between, it was 86, right? 34 years. They're going to have to incorporate, the technology has changed. It's going to be drones and pilotless aircraft. I don't know how they're going to do it, but we shall see. Interesting. I'm waiting to see. This next letter, it's a real short one, comes from Mason A. Mason A asks, "Hey, Rob, I was just wondering what you thought of the new Deep Space Nine documentary, What We Left Behind. Have you seen it? Thanks. Mason and Dave from Ottawa, Canada." Well, Mason and Dave, I have seen it. I was lucky to be given a screener version online. I loved it. I thought it was really moving, and it was an interesting approach because I, of course, made Star Trek documentaries for 3 years for the Blu-rays for Next Gen, but we came at it from an outsider's perspective. What I really loved about what We Leave Behind is basically you had Ira Stephen Bear, the impresario behind Deep Space Nine, overseeing this documentary, and along with David Lapone, and I thought his perspective and the way the actors approached it and the writers' room bit that they did was a really interesting look at the show that we could never, if Roger Lay and I continued on and made Deep Space Nine documentaries, we would not have made documentaries the way they made documentaries, the way What We Leave Behind turned out. And I think it's fascinating and wonderful and moving, and it's really terrific. And I pre-ordered the Blu-ray that's coming from Shout Factory, and kudos to them. It's amazing to me that a company that isn't Paramount or CBS is releasing that documentary on home video. Like, I would have thought it was a no-brainer to buy it and put it on CBS All Access, but apparently not. And it's just yet another indication of how they feel about Star Trek. I mean, you have your principals who make a documentary that involves all of the principal cast of one of your Star Trek shows, and you don't buy it. But it's a wonderful documentary. I highly recommend it, and pick it up on video when it's available. Thanks for writing in, Mason and Dave. This next letter comes from Dan Skip Allen, and it has, it's got spoilers in it, but I'm going to read it anyway because I want to talk about Godzilla King of the Monsters, which they thought was going to exceed its projected $50 million earnings with this weekend. It was projected to go up as high as 65 yesterday. Those estimates have been pulled back. But it was funny. I was actually texting with the director, Mike Doherty, last night at about 2 a.m, and he's very happy with how audiences have received it. Very funny. The Rotten Tomato meters on Godzilla was down to like 45% or something, but the verified viewers who've watched it are giving it a 90% rating. I think people are really digging it. But this letter comes in from Dan Skip Allen. "Hey, Rob, I forgot to talk to you about this the other day. Maybe because of spoilers, it was a good idea I didn't say anything then. You mentioned on the John Campea show earlier this week that if you were a fan of a certain Boston team, you may not be very happy after seeing Godzilla King of the Monsters. Yes, I did say that. Well, I finally saw it. I had a press invite to see it on Tuesday, May 28th, but I chose to keep my A-list reservation for Thursday, May 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Dolby. That experience was fantastic, to say the least. But to get to your statement, I was very upset at what happened to my city and my beloved Fenway Park. I'm a huge Red Sox fan. I cried myself to sleep in the fall of 1986 when my Sox blew the lead and lost to the Mets in Game 6 and eventually the series. What made Michael Dougherty do that to my beloved Boston and Fenway Park? Is he a fan of the evil empire that hated New York Yankees? I wonder. Maybe you could enlighten me on this. I definitely would like to know why anybody would do such a horrible thing to the Cathedral of Boston. Boston Strong, hashtag Boston Strong, hashtag Beantown Rules, hashtag Go Red Sox. Oh, Gilbert. Thanks, Rob. David Skip Allen. Read only if you think the spoiler ban is over. I don't think it's wrong to know that the climax of the movie takes place in Boston and some of it takes place in Fenway Park. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to text Mike Dougherty right now, and I'm going to ask him, and I don't know if he'll get this because he might have been up late at night. He might have been watching the box office returns, but I will see. I was texting with him. I've been asked. Let's see. I've been asked, why Boston? Why? Let's see what he says. Why Boston? Okay. And then I will say, why, Mike? Why? And see if he's got back to me. Hang on, I can't text today. Sorry, why, Mike? Why? And let's see if he gets back to me. I'll check in later in the show. Sometimes he gets back to me quickly. Sometimes he does not. We shall see. And hopefully, David Skip Allen, I will get you an answer right from the horse's mouth. This is a good one. I like this. This comes from Nick Nakos. Hi, Rob. First of all, I would like to introduce myself to you and the Post-Geek Singularity that I have become to like and admire. I hail from the little country called Greece. You mean the cradle of all civilization? But how is it that someone from a faraway land knows of you? Ask you, Rob. Well, for that to be made clear, I would have to go back a few years when, as a teenager and a Star Trek fan, I would go to the one place in my city that sold foreign magazines and try and get my hands on a magazine that had a front page picture of Star Trek on it, especially The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. I would jump at the opportunity to buy one, and I spent days reading and rereading the articles I was most interested in and the episode guides. Gilbert, I know there's strange people here. Come here, buddy. Come on. Gilbert, there's all kinds of, he doesn't like it when there's strange people here. Those magazines, Gilbert, please. Those magazines, sorry, you know what? When there's strange people in the house, Gilbert's going to bark. And I'm not going to put him out in the yard like someone might ask, because he will go around to the front gate and bark at all the people coming up. So we've got a curtain in the kitchen so no one can really see him. Anyway, I would jump at the opportunity to buy one and spend days reading and rereading the articles I was most interested in and the episode guides. I would take them to school to read during breaks from classes and transport to the 24th century. Those magazines were Cinefantastique, Cinescape, and Sci-Fi Universe, where you, Rob, wrote reviews as the critic at large. It is true. I was the critic at large for Sci-Fi Universe magazine in the 90s. It feels surreal to be able to see and hear you almost daily now, instead of having to wait a month or two for the magazine to arrive while having no clue about who the person is I'm reading or what they even look like. After getting introduced to science fiction via Trek, I branched out and became somewhat of a cinephile. I went into studying Greek philology. He says philology, so I would imagine the Greek language. My passion for film, or maybe it is philosophy. My passion for film, thankfully, was being satisfied through the university courses I could attend relating to that. I was fortunate enough that the university had a film history department, so film history, a Hitchcock seminar, a theater history studies, it all became my focus, alongside, of course, ancient Greek drama, literature, and poetics. I even got to perform Captain Picard's monologue to Q from Hamlet while holding a replica Oscar statuette. What a piece of work is man, etc. It was a prerequisite to use a prop of some sort while doing a monologue, so that made sense to me. I got a 10, of course, and a standing ovation. But enough about me. The main reason I'm writing this is because of what you asked us to do a couple of days ago on your show, but with a twist. If you remember, you told us to write to you about the 10 DVDs we would take with us on a desert island. The twist is, I thought it would be more interesting to write what yours were in 1996 as stated by you in the above magazine Sci-Fi Universe and see how you feel about those choices now. This is truly the past coming back to haunt me. I find it fascinating how a list like this can change over time, but scripta manet, as scripta manet, as the Latins say. So here goes. All right. Apparently, thank you to Nakos. This was my list of my 10 desert island discs from Sci-Fi Universe magazine in 1996. Number one. Well, this is crazy because I'm reading my own list to myself, to you guys on June 1st from 33 years or 23 years ago. Here's what I thought. Here's where my head was at in 1996. And by the way, at the time, these were all laser discs. Everything I'm sure that was on this list is a laser disc. So here I go. I'm going to read you my list. Number one, A Clockwork Orange, Warner Home Video. Still my favorite film from my favorite director. No frills, but a tight transfer. The film, as always, speaks for itself. Vidi well. Jaws, Special Edition MCA Home Video. New transfer, new interviews, same perfect movie. No boating accidents here. 3. Oh, and still one of my favorite. I have this Laserdisc still. It's one of my favorite things I own. Dawn of the Dead, perfect collection. Emotion Home Video, import. This is the Japanese box set. Romero's cut and Romero's director's cut and Argento's cut in one huge chrome box. Gore galore. Supplementary book even has shopping mall schematics. Oh, I still have that. The Empire Strikes Back, CLV, THX transfer, Fox Video. Hideous new jacket art, but still the best of the Star Wars series, and that's true today. And very possibly the finest fantasy film ever made. By the way, I still have those discs too. Number 5, 2001: A Space Odyssey, 25th Anniversary Edition, MGM Home Video. Another from Stan, my main man, Kubrick. The effects are still unsurpassed. Makes one ache for AI. Now, that's really interesting because in 1996, Stanley Kubrick had not passed away, and there was still talk that his next film after Eyes Wide Shut was going to be AI that Steven Spielberg eventually made after his death. Number 6, Wings of Desire from Image Entertainment. Wim Wenders' masterstroke of angelic fantasy may be the intellectual's E.T., a true celebration of humanity. Number 7, The Exorcist. Warner Home Video. Great with Wings of Desire. Still the most subversive horror film ever made. Every 12-year-old girl should have a crucifix. Next to Rosemary. Oh, and then Mark Altman, he put a little editorial comment here. Next to Rosemary's Baby. Genius. Number 8, War of the Worlds from Paramount Home Video. The movie that made me want to make movies. Recent transfer. Looks like someone painted every frame. Oh, I have that Laserdisc still. What a great transfer that was. Number 9, a tie. Aliens, The Abyss, and Terminator 2. Fox Laser Deluxe Editions. Jive and Jim Cameron's Blue Light Trilogy. I spoke that way because of his cinematography. Firmly cementing his reputation as the greatest genre filmmaker of the last decade. If only his writing ability equaled his visual skill, then we'd really have something. The exhaustive supplementary material on these discs will save everyone their film school tuition. Well, that's true. Those discs, I don't know if you remember if you had laser discs, but the Aliens and the Abyss box sets from Fox and the Terminator 2 disc were incredible special editions on Laserdisc and pioneered what was later done, of course, on DVD and then Blu-ray. Number 10 for my Desert Island discs, Star Trek Generations from Paramount Home Video. I know you're going, what? And I wrote because I'd need one totally useless disc to use as a reflector to signal passing ships to teleport me off this rock. Made me understand the phrase losing my religion. Cinematic history's best example of why some work in television and others work in the movies. But oh my, what a beautiful transfer. And then Nico says, needless to say, number 10 was a lot of fun. Laugh out loud. Thank you for your time in doing the show, and maybe I'll write mine in a follow-up with some commentary. Don't want to take up too much of everyone's time. I wish you well. Nick, the Friendly Borg. Well, Nikos, I want to thank you for writing. What's really interesting is currently Tango Shalom, Zoe, our one of our composers on the film who has created all the tango music, is in Greece. And she's working with, I guess, the Athens Symphony Orchestra even now. I just received a piece, there's a dance competition at the end of Tango Shalom, and the final dance competition music that our protagonists dance to, I just received a new version 7 to be exact, of the final dance music from Greece. Our sound designer had asked if she would actually put more bass and drum, not drum and bass like the genre drum and bass, but actually more low end and drums in the movie. There was in the song, there was some snares, but he wanted more of a fuller feel, and it's really cool. It's a great piece of music. So I'm very excited for that. All it's coming, and more is coming from Greece. So I'm actually working with your countrymen now. The director's wife, who's half Greek, is there overseeing all of this work. So that's pretty exciting. It's great to have viewers from Greece. I've never been there. I've always wanted to see the Parthenon. Brian Cruz sends this next letter in. Hey, Rob, I love all the topics you discuss on Robservations. There is one particular topic I love listening to the most, and it comes up often on your show. And it's a simple one. Why we love film. And with Godzilla, King of the Monsters coming out this week, I figured it would fit in nicely. A few months ago, you took a Star Trek-related email I sent you. In that email, I mentioned how I discovered Star Trek at a time when both my remarried parents were each getting divorces at the same time. I remember this letter. Plus several other things I was going through. And how Star Trek helped me with that. I have a very similar situation in my life when it comes to Godzilla. I was only 5 years old when my parents divorced each other. It was an odd time. Going from a happy family together in a big house to my mom moving into a small apartment and my parents fighting over custody of me. That custody battle was really bad, and only in my 20s did I finally learn how bad it got. But that's a topic for another day. But there's one amazing thing that happened to me during all of that. I discovered what someone referred to as the king of the monsters, Godzilla. The first memory I have of me and my mom in that new apartment was watching a movie called Godzilla vs. Biollante, the giant tentacled multi-headed plant. I do not remember if it was on TV or a rental, but regardless, I was hooked right away. I had to see more of these. That was a great time to discover Godzilla because in the late 90s and early 2000s, several of the Godzilla films were getting DVD releases here in America. They were glorious too. I have a lot of them. I spent the next couple of years begging my mother to buy these for me whenever we were in a video store. We developed quite a collection, and we watched them on repeat. I love that you watch Godzilla movies with your mom. My mother is very sentimental about all the things she did with me when I was a kid, which is why I made sure to take her to see Godzilla, King of the Monsters with me last night. It was so meaningful how she kept leaning over and saying stuff like, Brian, there's Mothra. You loved Mothra as a kid. And, oh, there's that bad guy, Ghidorah. I hate him. And seeing the pure joy on her face because she was reliving great memories she had with her son. Yeah, I'm a guy in my mid-20s who takes his mom to the movies. I don't mind admitting that. Why should you should always take your mom to the movies? Because they mean a lot to us. I already have my tickets to take my mom to Toy Story 4, and I know I will have to deal with her crying since that's also something me and her bonded with when I was a kid. Movies are great for a lot of reasons. A big reason they impact my life is simply the bonds they can create. I take my mother to see a lot of movies that were from stuff I grew up with. I go with friends for stuff we have in common. Sometimes it's simply we want to go because we both love film. I rewatch movies that mean a lot to me when things are bad in my life to make me feel better. Simply put, the impact films have on us can never be fully explained. They create memories, they help emotionally, and sometimes it's just to have fun. I spend almost all of my free time watching movies. Some people do judge me for it. But screw them. Do what's important to you. Brian Cruz. Brian, what a great letter. I just, what a fantastic thing to do. I love that you took your mom to see Godzilla King of the Monsters and she was leaning over to you because she knew who the monsters were. That's the greatest thing in the world. Fantastic. Let's see. I have one more letter to read, but I'm going to save it. It's a long one, but a good one. So I'm going to see what you guys have to say in this chat because I've been yammering away for a long time. Let's see. John DeBenedict says, Jim, your name is Jim. Yes, that's, of course, the end of Star Trek 3. And you know what? Jim, or John DeBenedict, not Jim. John DeBenedict is talking about Jim, what Spock says, his final lines. Chokes up, even now, even though they're on what's obviously a set, the top of Mount Salea, basically where Amok Time, they've made it. That's where Amok Time also took place. They've all figured that out in continuity, as we know from the remastered Star Trek. What a great ending for that movie. And then you cut to the wide shot and everybody crowds around Spock and he gives the eyebrow arching. I mean, look, there is joys to be had in Star Trek 3, no doubt. And that is definitely one of them. Factual Opinion is here. He said, have you seen a Serbian film? It's messed up, but amusing. Yes. Okay, for those who might not know, there is a movie that came out a number of years ago, not that long ago, called A Serbian Film. It is one of the most disgusting and disturbing movies you will ever see. And it is obviously a provocative exploitation movie. And there's a lot of people that were angry about A Serbian Film. But basically, I actually read an article with the director. And what he was trying to do was make, at least this is what I remember him saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was trying to make a film that conveyed what the Balkans, what the conflict did, and I'm sure that Joseph and Vesna would have more insight into this than I would, but he was trying to make what is ostensibly a horror film that was an allegorical take on what the Balkans conflict did to the people of those nations. And I don't know if I buy that. I mean, watching a just born baby perform fellatio and then, yeah, it's really, if you haven't seen A Serbian Film, I can't recommend it. I won't recommend it. But if you're so inclined, it is an experience. And I do have it on my hard drive somewhere. I have the uncut version because I archived it because I didn't know if I'd ever be able to get the uncut version. It did cause a lot of eyebrows to raise when it came out. Square Wheel says, your thoughts on Insurrection, other than the JJ Trek, it is my least favorite. You hate Insurrection less than Nemesis. I think Insurrection, what's really interesting, first of all, Insurrection is a deeply compromised film. I think there's a lot to like in it. I like the Baku, but once again, it suffers from a problem that, yes, you're wondering, I was wondering, you have basically this group of people that is living in one village on this entire planet. And you have the villains, the Sona. And by the way, I won't get into the relationship between the Sona and the Baku. But the Sona want to steal the energy that's surrounding this planet, which makes it the fountain of youth. Well, why don't they just land on the other side of the planet? Nobody would ever know. It's not like the Baku are making transcontinental flights across their planet. There was room for everybody. I think that Insurrection suffers from a script that's all over the place, and it plays like a 2-hour episode of Next Generation, kind of a mid-range episode. If you read the Michael Piller book on the making of Insurrection, and it's never come out officially, you can get it online. I think I have a copy of it. I could send it to you if you send me a request through the Burnettwork. It's a fascinating read, and you can also see Patrick Stewart's influence and how he comes off not badly in that book, but it's not the movie that they set out to make. And I think the movie that Michael Piller was trying to make would have been much more interesting than the Insurrection that we finally got. I do like some of it, but Insurrection is such a compromised movie that even at the end of the film, you see when they're on the collector that it's all blue. They were supposed to comp in a Starfield background, and they didn't even bother to do that. Probably because they didn't realize how much it was going to cost, because every shot in there would require a comp. But it's not great. Factual Opinion says, laugh out loud. As soon as you said the letter, Factual Opinion says, as soon as you said the letter will have Godzilla 2 spoilers, I hopped out of the shower and to turn the volume down. I plan on watching it in an hour. Well, Factual Opinion, report back and tell us what you think. Swirgirl, what is it? SWGJR 87, Stuffing Things, says, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, your thoughts. Well, here's the funny thing. I loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic, the Eastman and Laird comic, when it first came out, because it was not really for kids. It was very dark, and it was sort of it was a parody of what Frank Miller had been doing with things like Ronin and Daredevil. And I liked the original comics. I even have the original comics somewhere, which I should pull out and get graded because they're worth a lot of money. And I want to sell my comic book collection. As a matter of fact, if you guys want any comics from the 80s, selling stuff cheap, I got to get rid of them. Anyway, but check them out. But yeah, so I like the comics. You know, the cartoon series and the movies skewed young. So, I mean, they weren't part of I was a little too old for them. And I thought it was weird how they took these basically parody comics and turned them into kid-friendly things. But I like them. Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo. Thought that was cool, And if nothing else, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles will always turn kids on to, I guess they were Renaissance painters, so that's a good thing. But I don't hate the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I've watched all the movies. It's very interesting. I do get a kick, especially out of the live action version stuff. I like seeing the guys in the suits and how they did all that stuff. So, and how can you dislike the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Stubble McShave says, I've seen Good Omens now. I like the interaction between Sheen and Tennant, but I've mixed feelings about it. It reminded me of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie. Stubble McShave, I too sampled Good Omens last night. I watched the first 2 episodes, and I agree. It's very similar to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, both the BBC series and the Hitchhiker's Guide movie. I think that if this makes sense, it's a little too twee for me. I would have approached it differently. I appreciated what they were trying to go for, and it certainly was. They had a vision for it. I don't think it entirely worked, to be honest. And but that's only. I haven't watched anything more. I'm going to finish the show, but in a way, I loved, like you. I loved Tennant and Sheen. But I'm very mixed on what I've seen so far, which I thought was interesting. Look, there's nothing else like it, but it was a little too, like I said, twee. I was expecting something a little more grounded, but I enjoyed watching it, and I'm going to go back and probably watch the rest today. Koba says, I love when Koba shows up, just because I loved the new Planet of the Apes trilogy and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I love Koba. Koba says, I'm normally Team Ape any day, but I'm sorry. After seeing Godzilla, King of the Monsters, I have to say Kong is going down. What is a king to a god? Goddamn right, Koba. I am right there with you, sir. I mean, I don't understand. Like, they're going to make King Kong bigger? I guess. They're going to make him bigger? All right, well, before I get back to these chats, I'm going to read, I guess I would call it, the marquee letter. Is this the marquee letter of the day? And it's the letter that kind of inspired me about what this chat was going to be about. At first, I had a whole different, I found some Getty, I think I Googled happy fans. And I got all these Getty images from the 50s of like happy teeny boppers, Bobby Soxers, and I actually made a my little thumbnail picture that, by the way, I was criticized once. Somebody said my pretentious artist picture of myself. I'm like, look, you know what? It's better if you want people to watch your show if you have something other than me going, hey, although those are good too. If I only got 2 minutes left and I don't have time to make a thumbnail, I'll be like, and take my picture, and that'll be my thumbnail, and that's fine. But it's funny, you get criticized for everything online, and someone said I was a pretentious dick by having that picture of me. But what's funny is it actually is an author photo. So there you go. But anyway, so I changed it because I decided, and I was just going to make this letter the only letter I was going to read. Then I realized it was it's the 35th birthday of Star Trek 3, and I wanted to keep it on a more positive tip. But this is a positive letter, but you'll see. I'm going to read it. And this comes from a new listener, a new member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, who I've seen popping up all over the place now, and I very much appreciated the interaction with her. And when I just go by people's names. I know that gender and you can change your name. You don't know about anybody online anymore, but I assume I'm going to say that Lucy Wong. I would just assume that Lucy Wong is as her name would perhaps imply. Lucy, she is a woman. And I want to thank Lucy Wong for being a new member of the Post-Geek Singularity community and writing me a thoughtful letter. So here it goes. Hi, Rob. I came to your channel through a recommendation from one of your viewers while watching a live stream on another channel, Good Thoughts with Peyton. I've never seen Good Thoughts with Peyton, but I like that. I've always loved the name Peyton. My sister's son, her youngest son, is also named Peyton, but I've also liked the name for a girl's name as well. Good Thoughts with Peyton. I mentioned in the chat looking for a non-toxic community, and someone suggested you. It turned out to be a great suggestion. Well, that's great to be talked about that way. You may have seen some of my comments in defense of Brie Larson and the, I think, unfair treatment she has been receiving by some fan channels. I feel her words have been twisted, taken out of context, all just to make sensational headlines and thumbnails to cash in on subscription, views, and dollars. I'm really disturbed by the growth of what I would call toxic hate channels. I believe you may have addressed this calling it outrage culture. I don't understand the mentality that is drawn to such behavior where people are demeaned, disrespected, humiliated in the name of what? Being true fans, real fans? That is a whole subject in itself and not why I'm writing to you. As I mentioned, I'm disturbed by the growing amount of hate in the society's social media. The other day, while watching a live stream on Good Thoughts with Peyton, a 27-year-old female who does movie reviews and random things, a huge Star Wars fan, etc. And while it was running, someone commented, "You're trending in Germany." Of course, she was excited. Her channel is about 10,500 subscribers, right along the lines of my channel. And the person said to say in German, meaning welcome fans. She did. Then someone said to look it up. Of course she was excited. Her channel is about 10,500 subscribers. And the person said to her to say something in German, which he said means welcome fans. She said that, and then someone said to look it up, and it ended up meaning death to Jews. Needless to say, Peyton was upset. And then Jew hater kept popping up over and over too quickly for moderators to stop, and Peyton ended the stream. It was upsetting to everyone. I have a good idea who was behind it. A channel from those Fandom menace people, another female who months ago dedicated 21 minutes of a video to humiliating Peyton about her voice, her mannerisms, etc., simply because during a live stream, Peyton expressed not liking channels that use clickbait, who pander for views, who do videos about the same thing over and over again, etc. She never mentioned the channel name, but if you were guessed who it was, and she acknowledged that was the one. That person is a friend of the one who made the 21-minute video. I suspected her, the person who did the 21-minute video, Googled to see if she was Jewish. She is. Googled to see if she speaks German. She does. And the name she used on the live stream was Cowgirl, and her channel photo is a cowl. A cow. Coincidence? I think not. This whole situation reminds me of Brie Larson having her statement taken out of context and these fandom menace people creating their own narrative for dollars. I've taken it upon myself to browse more to find channels such as yours. I want to believe that good will win over evil. So with that being said, I would like to propose a win-win. I did see that you are located in Pasadena. Peyton is in Orange County near Disneyland. I would like to suggest that you, Rob, become the better, positive, non-toxic force for good, as opposed to the toxicity of the fandom menace like Geeks and Gamers, etc. I don't know how you all go about it, but I observed how Geeks and Gamers has grown through bringing smaller channels on board, and I would like to see those of you who are not part of that toxic community grow even greater. Maybe you could invite Peyton to do a discussion. She appears very knowledgeable on Star Wars, etc., and discuss toxicity in social media. Then more people like myself could get to know you, and your people might get to know her. Then there is a nice fellow named Chris at Journo's Comics, a small channel, only 1,000 people, and another at 1,000, Craig James Reviews, both nice guys who don't spread toxicity. There's also Robert Storms, whose language can be quite foul, I'm sad to say, but he's not about spreading hate either. There must be more out there who, like you and Good Thoughts with Peyton, do not want to have spreading hate as their legacy. If you check out Good Thoughts with Peyton, note that in her earliest videos she did cuss quite a bit, but it has been pretty non-existent until Game of Thrones episode 4, when one of the dragons was killed and Jon Snow ignored Ghost. I'd say she let loose 100 F-bombs in the first 20 minutes or so, LOL, through episode 6. This is my crusade to try and pull good people together. I want to see all of you succeed. I want the light side to win. If you made it through this, thank you. If you have any questions, please let me know. Sorry for the length and the babbling. I appreciate the non-toxic community you have built, and I love Gilbert. He has trained you well to give him cookies. Well, first of all, Lucy, I want to thank you for that thoughtful letter. Very nice. And by the way, now I have Tallulah, and I've trained them both to sit at the same time. Tallulah is very well behaved, and they both eat cookies together. I wish I could show you. It's quite adorable. Well, first of all, here's what I don't understand. First of all, that Nick just read back or sent me something I wrote back in 1996. I have been the same person my whole life in regards to fandom. For the most part, and I think it comes across in these chats, I just love all this stuff. I've always loved all of this stuff. And when I was growing up, I had maybe one or two friends that were into it, but I didn't have a wider community that I could share my loves of science fiction, fantasy, and horror in all of its myriad forms, novels, comics, model kits, home video, whatever. I was sort of by myself in this. I mean, I would involve girlfriends. I'd drag them to conventions, and I had friends. I had a big group of friends. We'd all go to the movies and things like that. But they weren't hunting for movie novelizations at B. Dalton Books and looking for the latest issue of Fangoria, nor would they drive or take 2 buses to the comic book store every Wednesday. And it wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles that I met a bunch of people, a bunch of like-minded people that were just like me that moved from other parts of the country. It was kind of like hearing that call from the aliens in Close Encounters. We all showed up at Devil's Tower, but for us, Devil's Tower was Los Angeles in the motion picture business and the larger entertainment business. And it was great. And I met, and I still have, so many friends that love all this stuff as much as I do. That's why we have the Inglorious Treksperts podcast. I mean, Mark Altman, who I made Free Enterprise with, and Darren Doctorman, who I met him doing Talk Trek. He was doing a Star Trek radio talk show back in the day, and I just worked with him on Tango Shalom. He did some visual effects for us, and he's designing opening credits. But I mean, I've always loved this stuff. There was no, to me, downside. Now, did I love everything? No, it was a favorite thing in the pages of Sci-Fi Universe magazine to slam Voyager. My stance on Star Trek has always been critical. I wrote an article with one of my good buddies, Dave Hargrove, who I still know. A very snarky article called Worst Contact, why Star Trek First Contact is the worst Star Trek movie. And I still stand by that article. I mean, I like the movie now more, but I thought it was a sort of a one-dimensional rehash that made mincemeat of Zephram Cochrane, and I thought the whole movie was kind of a joke when I first saw it and didn't understand why they had a bored queen. I mean, now people look back and it's obviously the best of the Next Generation movies, and I have a great fondness for First Contact. I still think it's a little redundant and weird, but okay. But there was always an underlying, as critical as we were, the most famous article Sci-Fi Universe ever published, and it was by Dana Gould and Dan Weber, who now I believe is working on The Simpsons. They wrote a cover story called 50 Reasons Why Return of the Jedi Sucks. And it was a very funny article. It's a very true article. But when the article was written, it was understood that we all love Star Wars. We all love Star Wars, but that didn't mean that you couldn't be critical of it and that you couldn't look at Return of the Jedi and show that it's, compared to the first two movies, it has obvious deficiencies. But it was never misunderstood that all of us, and we thought we were the hipper than thou. If you read Sci-Fi Universe, we were the cool geeks. If there was such a thing. Now everybody in the post-geek singularity community, everybody's a cool geek. But back in the mid-90s, it was kind of a thing, you know, and you had Chris Gore, who came over from Film Threat, established the magazine with Mark, and there was another magazine called Spy Magazine, and we are sort of the geek version of Spy, or at least we like to think of ourselves as the geek version of Spy. But there was always underlying love. Like, if Last Jedi had come out and there was people in the bullpen that wrote for Sci-Fi Universe who didn't like the movie and were critical of it and wrote an article like 50 Reasons Why, that sounded bad. The art show that something's bad happening. Anyway, I don't know what just fell and broke, something bad, but I'll continue on. So anyway, the point I was trying to make is that there was always love. If we wrote an article, 50 Reasons Why The Last Jedi Sucked, everyone would understood that we all love Star Trek. We've loved Star Wars. And our critical acumen, when we brought a critical eye to this stuff, it was because we loved it. And we're still tongue in cheek. We still had sort of a wry smile when we wrote these articles. Now, what I have seen in fan circles is true acrimony. And by the way, when we as Sci-Fi Universe writers, we would put on events. When I met my biological mother, we put on Sci-Fi Kids Day at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Mark Altman and I thought up the idea, and Mark Altman said, "Let's do it." We literally put on an event for thousands of people at the MGM in Las Vegas, and we had celebrities from different TV shows and sci-fi luminaries show up, and we were sharing the love. It was truly like the Ewoks, celebrate the love. It was yub nub all over the place, and that's what I thought. That's what I grew up thinking that fandom was, and I think that one of the great downfalls of this evolutionary process that we're living in the midst of with social media is that there is a profound lack of respect for our fellow human beings, especially here in America. And there's a lot of reasons. I have a theory that Bart Simpson and Nickelodeon have done more to erode the respect that people have, because it's gone from the youth up in a way. We have kids that don't respect their teachers or their parents. And because we've lived with 30 years of Bart Simpson, like, hey man, when we were growing up, every kid knew that their parents and their teachers, you didn't talk back. I mean, I grew up with, the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family and Leave It to Beaver, where elders were respected. And now we live in a world where there isn't this kind of respect. And it was interesting. Like, I grew up with people like, Ripley. And I grew up with Star Crash. And even though Caroline Munro was smoking hot, she was still the lead and kicked ass. I never had a problem with any of those things. And I wanted more women in the fan space. And it's funny because, Brie Larson, I think she totally was misconstrued. I'm like, I don't have a problem when she says it would be nice to see less, what did she say, middle-aged white guys critiquing these comic book movies. And she wasn't wrong. I mean, what I don't understand is when somebody says that, I don't take offense to that. It's true. It's true. I'm a middle-aged white guy talking about these things, and there's nothing wrong with stating that, hey, you know, this is the truth. There's nothing wrong with the truth or recognizing the truth. And for a long time in the fan space, it was incredibly male dominated. And yes, people talk about there were women that went to Star Trek conventions, sure. But for the most part, there weren't a lot of women that went to comic book conventions. There were some, but Star Trek had more of a diverse when you go to a Star Trek convention. But I don't understand living in a world now why there's so much acrimony when we're getting so much great stuff. We might not love the adaptation of Good Omens as much as we wanted to love it, but we're getting an adaptation of one of my favorite fantasy novels, Good Omens, and it's being done in high fashion. I mean, it's incredible if you look that we live in a time now where we've got The Man in the High Castle, The Handmaid's Tale, Good Omens. These are all literary-based fantasy and science fiction works. Who would have thought that we would have seen these kinds of things, and they're gobbling up, they're making even more. The Expanse as well, that they're looking to science fiction and fantasy and horror novels to adapt. The Haunting of Hill House, based on what, Shirley Jackson's book. We live in a time that is extraordinary and I talk about the post-geek singularity. It's amazing where we live right now and what we are getting on almost a daily basis. It's unbelievable. And yet the acrimony that exists is baffling to me. I really don't understand it. I really don't get it at all. And as I've said, we live in these amazing times here in the post-geek singularity. And it's not about, I've been stunned by the fact that you guys have gone on. I cannot wear this anymore. I've been stunned by the fact that I've been cited as being a channel for positivity, because as anyone who knows me can tell you, I've always been that way when it comes to this stuff. I mean, I might be critical of Star Trek Discovery, and because it sucks. It's bad Star Trek. I think it's demonstrably bad Star Trek, and it's bad storytelling. However, and it's a flagrant misuse of a television budget. But I am happy that we're getting more Star Trek. We're living through a period of time where the stewards of the franchise, and history is not going to look kind upon them, are not making Star Trek for the right reasons, which is, I think, to tell great stories. Now it's become a business decision, the acrimony behind the scenes. It's let's line our own pockets. We got this great golden goose that we're now in control of. So ha ha ha, but whatever. That doesn't mean I'm not watching Star Trek Discovery. Every time I tune in, I'm like, maybe this time they're going to get it right. Maybe this time it's not going to be terrible. But the fact is, we're getting the most expensive Star Trek show ever made, at least from what I've heard, in the Picard series. And I'm hoping that it indeed will be terrific. I really want it to be terrific. I'm hoping it's going to be terrific. And I think that all of the acrimony is something that I would like to steer away from. So, Lucy, your suggestion of partnering up with other people that are trying to bring positivity. I mean, I'll watch Good Thoughts with Peyton. I think that's not a bad idea. I've talked a lot about this with Mike Bodden, my business partner and one of the moderators here, who's currently enjoying himself in Italy. I think that that's not a bad idea. I don't know how I would go about doing that. There's people I've talked to, people like Ali State online, who's back east. I've wanted to bring her on the show because I like her perspective a great deal, and maybe interact with more YouTubers in this space, because I think it's really important. And I didn't realize that my message of positivity was even there. I was trying to be myself, and there's a lot of negativity. I'm still in this dispute with my former partner at Axonar, who is doing all he can to besmirch my reputation, and, as he put it, ruin my reputation and destroy my life. He actually wrote that in an email to Mike Bodden. And it's very strange to see that when all I've ever done is try and be positive. But maybe you're right. Maybe that is a good idea. I don't know how to go about doing that necessarily. I should look into that. But I think it's a really good idea because, as I've been told by all of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, that positivity is sort of this thing that is unique to me, I guess. But as anyone will ever tell you, I've always been positive about this stuff. And I think it's important, because what's not to be positive about? Sure, are you getting the Star Wars movie that you want? Well, no, but we're getting Star Wars movies and they're being made in grand fashion. They're grossing more money than they've ever grossed. We're getting The Mandalorian. We're getting a Cassian Andor series. I mean, the people that worked on The Mandalorian, I'm expecting it to kick ass. And if The Mandalorian does kick ass, it'll kick Star Wars into high gear. We have Galaxy's Edge that opened yesterday. Everyone's excited about Star Wars again, and they should be. You know, why be toxic? It doesn't. I don't get it. You know, I really don't understand it, but it's part of a larger problem in the culture, and that the respect that people have for one another has been completely eroded. And as I've always said, everybody you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen, but you're never going to get to that point unless you respect other people and understand that every human being, every human life is worth learning something from. I really believe that. So maybe you're right. I don't think that's a bad idea. I will check in to Peyton. Good thoughts with Peyton. That's great. And I want to thank you for your letter, and I want to thank you for being so thoughtful. And thanks for being a new member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Well, that's the end of the letters for today. So let's see if I got more chats coming in. I will look and see where we're at. Kobo was the last person. So let's see where we're at now. I love the letters. If you guys send me letters, the letters are the things that give me the most joy on a daily basis. They really do. And you can always write me at the Burnettwork.net. Send those letters along because you need to. You make the show better. I feel I should be paying everybody. Let's see. Willow Yang sent me a chat. Willow Yang says, "What? Kirk's son dies in Star Trek 3? Ah, spoilers. Next thing you're going to tell me is that Spock dies in Star Trek 2. No, I'm not going to say that. Anyway, I'm sorry, Willow Yang. I didn't mean to spoil that for you. But it's true. You know, you'll get there. You'll get there. Square Wheel says, my mom took me to see The Thing when I was 11. Golf clap for your mom. Good. Did she like it? And by the way, I would assume that it was The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing in 1982. That's amazing. Oh, man. Stubble McShave said, you've said you like Bergman films. What's your favorite? Well, you know, it's that's tough. You know what? Persona, maybe Persona. Yeah, but I have to think about that. You know, I've got my right there. I've got my Toshin, the original release of the Bergman archives. That's a tough one. But you know, of course, the first Bergman film I saw was The Seventh Seal and Cries and Whispers and The Virgin Spring. But yeah, I'm a big Bergman fan. You know what's funny that you ask about that? What's really funny about a Bergman is that yesterday, one of my favorite things is now, for whatever reason, when I go to my YouTube feed, old episodes of the Dick Cavett show. Dick Cavett was a talk show host. And if you go back and you watch old talk shows in the day were so much better than now, because the guests would just have these freewheeling conversations. And I actually watched Ingmar Bergman yesterday on an old clip from the Dick Cavett show. I think she was on there with Lee Oldman, I think. But or maybe not. But it was great. And it's a new obsession. So go look up Dick Cavett and watch people on his show. But that's what I would say, Stubble. Idiot Head says, Trek 3 was the first movie I saw in the theater. Wow. I loved how Taco Bell glasses had spoilers printed on them. Back then, we didn't care. Thanks for what you do. Well, you know what's funny about Star Trek 3? If you guys remember the trailer, it was billed as the last voyage of the Starship Enterprise. And then they showed the Enterprise blow up in the trailer. I was like, what? Sorry, Willow. But I mean, it was so lame. Like they've blown up the Enterprise so many times. It was a bad precedent. It worked in Star Trek 3. My God, Bones, what have I done? What you always do, what you had to do, turn death into a fighting chance for life. I mean, come on. That stuff was great. Loved it. John Suntris is here. Oh, wait. Hang on before I get to John. Hands of Stone said, June 1st is also the 31st anniversary of the release of Walter Hill's Streets of Fire. Thoughts on that film? You know what? My thought on Streets of Fire is tonight is what it means to be young. If you guys have not seen Streets of Fire, a rock and roll fable, I did not know that Streets of Fire opened the same day as Star Trek 3. Wow, that's amazing. I love Streets of Fire. Shout put out a great Blu-ray of it. I actually have a UK import because it was on Blu-ray. I love Streets of Fire. Streets of Fire is Walter Hill's rock and roll fable. It starred Michael Pare. It has Willem Dafoe as Raven Shattuck. But most of all, it has Rick Moranis. It has Diane Lane. If you looked at Diane Lane, I think you could make, I think the most beautiful woman that was acting, and she was young, but the most beautiful woman acting in movies in the early 80s had to have been Diane Lane. If you watch her in Rumblefish, in The Outsiders, and as Ellen Aim in Streets of Fire, my God, she was amazing. Tonight is what it means to be young. I can dream about you. I love Streets of Fire. If you haven't seen Streets of Fire, it's incredible. I can't believe it's 35 years old. You know what? I'm going to go watch that. And I'm going to play it on my home theater system loud. I think I'm going to watch Streets of Fire today. That is incredible that you mentioned that. Hands of Stone. I love Streets of Fire. If you want to see a great, fun movie. And by the way, it was one of the first, well, not the first, heavily influenced by MTV. Heavily influenced by MTV. So you got to check it out. If you haven't seen Streets of Fire, I wholeheartedly recommend it. Walter Hill was literally on fire. Oh, unfortunately, Streets of Fire was supposed to be a trilogy. There's actually a sequel to Streets of Fire directed by Albert Pune, who directed The Sword and the Sorcerer, but it's not very good, unfortunately. Amy Madigan is in it. Oh, I love Streets of Fire. Anyway, you got to watch Streets of Fire. It's tremendous and an incredible soundtrack. An incredible soundtrack. You'll love it. So Hands of Stone, good call. Thanks for that. Oh, John Suntress is here from the Word Balloon podcast. I did a 3-hour rollicking conversation with him yesterday, and he asks, favorite short-run old TV shows found on YouTube. What, John, I know. If you haven't listened to the Word Balloon podcast, you should listen to it. I did a 3-hour, he let me babble on. I don't even remember what I said. I know I remember talking about one of my favorite YouTube channels, Natalie Wynn's ContraPoints. You got to go check out ContraPoints, especially her latest video on beauty. It's pretty courageous and amazing. But I rambled on for a long time. But so John says, favorite short-run old TV show found on YouTube. Well, we talked about it yesterday. I'm going to talk about it now. There is a crazy science fiction show that I think it ran maybe 8 episodes, maybe 10 episodes, called Otherworld. And it was basically about a family that fell into this parallel universe and kept going to different parallel universes or parallel lands. And Jonathan Banks from Breaking Bad and one of the greatest TV shows of the 80s, Wise Guy, who played the head of OCB or an OCB agent and oversaw Vinny Terranova, played by Ken Wall, one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Otherworld, you got to check out Otherworld. It's crazy, and it's all on YouTube. So John, he's asking my favorite short-run old TV show. He just wanted me to say Otherworld. You got to watch it. I went on an Otherworld. It's funny, when we brought this up, when he brought it up yesterday, I said, dude, I went on an Otherworld jag like a month or two ago, and I didn't watch all of them all the way through, but I kind of scanned through all of them. It's crazy. Watch Otherworld. It's on YouTube. Kevin Royes is here. Kevin, first of all, thank you for supporting the channel. That was very nice of you. Very disappointed that it looks like King of the Monsters is not doing well at the box office. They went all in with the world building, and it looks like it may end with Godzilla versus Kong. So disappointing. That was the definitive King Ghidorah. I agree. Look, I'm hoping that audience word of mouth, they're saying that Saturday was not going to do good business after Friday. I'm hoping that all the people I've received, mostly I would say 95% positive word of mouth about Godzilla King of the Monsters. I had such a good time with it. I think a lot of people are who go in there and they're getting what they expect. But again, fandom is weird. I think part of the real problem with fandom is there's really a demarcation point with fans that they expect a certain type of thing. The thing about the Godzilla 2014 movie is most people want, they weren't given enough Godzilla in that movie, but the tone and the approach to these movies, and also to a certain extent Jurassic Park, where there's a grounded realism, I would call it, that has been brought into play. They want to feel that this grounded realism, which permeates all of our fantasy filmmaking here in the United States, is the norm. And that's what we're going to see across everything. And I think that what's interesting to me is, and as I said, my tweet when I first walked out of Godzilla King of the Monsters on May 10th, when I went to the influencer screening, I said that watching Godzilla King of the Monsters was as if my 8-year-old inner child snorted a Tony Montana-sized mountain of cocaine. By the way, Elizabeth asked me last night when we were having dinner, she goes, "Who's Tony Montana?" Still love her. But it made me feel that way. But because, Mike Doherty is such a Godzilla fan that, yes, Godzilla King of the Monsters does not have the grounded, realistic, naturalistic feel that a lot of even Godzilla 2014 had. And I've always not liked that about, like, for me, Pacific Rim, which a lot of people do not love as much as I do. When I saw Pacific Rim with Derek Hughes, and when we saw a special screening 4 months before it opened, and Guillermo del Toro was there, and I'd wanted to see it, I was like, I loved it so much because I grew up with Japanese science fiction. I've often talked about the whimsy of Japanese sci-fi, of Asian science fiction. Leiji Matsumoto, or Matsumoto Leiji, like Galaxy Express, a steam train in space, Space Battleship Yamato, or Star Blazers, when you have the Battleship Yamato resurrected to go into space. That kind of whimsy, Queen Emeraldus and Captain Harlock and all that stuff, which I love. And even giant super robots, whether it was Johnny Sacco or whether it's the work of Go Nagai, whether it was Getter Robo or Getter Robo G and Grandizer, and I loved all that stuff, Goldrake. And if you can't make that leap in your own mind, you can't get past that. I think that a movie like Godzilla King of the Monsters that embraces the Toho spirit more so, especially more so than Godzilla 2014, it goes for it. Even the human characters are much more akin to it was like in Pacific Rim having the bickering doctors and things. I mean, those characters are right out of manga and anime, and if you don't watch that kind of stuff, how that a lot of Japanese science fiction is very melodramatic, the interpersonal relationships, and like even in Evangelion, the interpersonal relationships, or in Macross or Robotech, Lin Min-Mei and all that. I get it. I understand. And unfortunately, American audiences, I think generally it's not exactly what they're comfortable with or maybe what they get. Now, I'm coming from a perspective where I really like Godzilla King of the Monsters because it felt more akin to a Toho Godzilla movie. But if that's not something you're predisposed to liking, or something you've even been exposed to, as I've said before, there's people that watch Toho Godzilla films and like, what is this? It's like if you don't like pro wrestling, if you don't find anything amusing about pro wrestling, you're probably not going to like Godzilla King of the Monsters. But if you can watch pro wrestling, and I just use that as an example, or you can watch a Toho monster film. And the funny thing about Toho monster movies is if you watch the original Godzilla and you watch Rodan, they're very serious films. And then when you get to Godzilla versus Megalon, it gets a little crazy and silly. Godzilla's Revenge. These movies are wacky. And even the Godzilla, within the Godzilla pantheon of films, the tone of these movies is wildly divergent. And so we've got to take that into consideration, and people need to take that in consideration. But anyway, Kaiju Diesel is here and says, are you concerned with the prospects of the Monsterverse following Godzilla versus Kong? It may be the final American Godzilla film for many years. If it is, and we have Godzilla and Kong Skull Island and Godzilla King of the versus Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then we get Godzilla versus Kong, that's respectable. That's 4 movies. I would like to see more. I'd like to see them go full on Godzilla versus the Astro Monster, Planet X, aliens, landscapes, all that. They're not going to do that. Or the crazy time travel, wacky antics and the anti-American antics of Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, or Godzilla versus Ghidorah back from the early 90s, which I actually really like. Love Mothra. I tweeted 10 of my favorite Godzilla movies yesterday. But it bums me out. I would like to see these movies make more and more money. But you know what? It's a thing. It's not, if it's not in the cards, it's not what audiences necessarily want. I think it's the people that love, just like I love Pacific Rim. We did finally get a Pacific Rim 2. We'll see how Godzilla King of the Mountain. I didn't like Pacific Rim 2. It was very disappointing to me, but I love the first one. I still love all the Jaegers and the kaiju, though. The kaiju are great in those movies. But maybe foreign Godzilla King of the Monsters will do much better in Asia or China, and we'll get another one, or we'll keep going, because I would like to see him go even further. You know, who knows? But it's a bummer that it's not making more money, because I think it's really fun. Stubble McShave says, have you seen the horror film I Am Not a Serial Killer, based on the great novel by Dan Wells? He's also on a Good Writing podcast. I have. I liked I Am Not a Serial Killer. I think I watched it on Netflix. I watched it on some streaming service. I thought it was really, really good. I really liked it. It's good. I mean, I would suggest everybody watch it. It's different than I would have expected. But yes, watch I Am Not a Serial Killer. It's good. JB Bonifacio says, have you seen Cowboy Bebop? Come on. I have the whole series of Cowboy Bebop. I bought the UK imports because they were the only ones available before the Cowboy Bebop is awesome. If you guys haven't seen Cowboy Bebop, Spike Spiegel will become a very favorite of yours. The jazzy soundtrack will be. I even have a 4-disc CD set of the soundtrack from Cowboy Bebop. I love Cowboy Bebop. I can't wait for the live action Cowboy Bebop show. I think it's going to be amazing. And really, I cannot wait. It's going to be fantastic. Love Cowboy Bebop. So, I think you can't be a fan of anime and not be a fan of Cowboy Bebop or science fiction, because it's such a great show. It really is. JPRPH1 says, sorry if you've already addressed this. What did you think of Good Omens on Amazon? Well, I did already address it earlier, but I will once again reiterate and say I watched the first 2 episodes, and I enjoyed watching it, but it's very hit and miss for me. I'm not down with the entire approach. I would have gone more realistic. I said it was a little twee. But again, I've only seen the first 2 episodes. I really like Shannon and Tennant. I love what David Tennant and Michael Shannon are doing. Did I say Shannon? I really enjoy it. I think their chemistry is really great. But the show itself as a whole, jury is still out. Right now, I think the best thing I've been watching has been Chernobyl. I really want to see The Society on Netflix, although it has what I call an impossible premise. What their premise actually can't happen, but you just go with it and they just never explain it. Like Cube or like Escape Room. I don't know if I'm down with impossible premise movies, but they happen. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the show, but we shall see if it is any good. So yeah, let's see what anybody is saying what are you guys saying in the chat room? What's going on? How are you? Pre-Life Teacher says, I was listening to the Fugees, The Score, while I was jogging. Good album. The name Doctor Strange in a track. Comic lovers are everywhere. Yeah. Otter Vomit says, Doomcock ripped Godzilla up and down. Doomcock is, of course, another YouTuber who I like to watch. I can see why. This for the same reasons he doesn't like Star Trek Discovery. A lot of people would think that I should be one to rip Godzilla up and down. And it's funny because there's intersectionality amongst the intellectual dork web, or not intersectionality. Again, I think it really depends where you are coming from. I'm coming from a great love of those things. I grew up with those things. I'm very much an aficionado of those things. A lot of people aren't. I'm sorry he didn't not like it. I will go and watch his review, because I do. Whether I agree with Doomcock or not, I really do appreciate what he does. It's pretty funny. Yeah, I thought it was terrific. Let's see. Milton Bradley says Godzilla just hasn't crossed over with mainstream audiences. That's all. Milton Bradley, I don't disagree with you. I think that you're probably right. Look, it's a lot to ask. It's why I've talked to people who've watched The Wandering Earth. One of the biggest movies in Chinese history. Was huge, and they hate it. look, you got to have that sense of whimsy. I mean, I don't know if the Wandering Earth is that great of a movie. I didn't love it. I certainly didn't love it. I thought it was overstuffed. I'm like, wow. And there was not a lot of verisimilitude, and it wasn't really grounded or down to earth. But I appreciated where it was coming from, and I enjoyed watching it. Jeffrey Berry says, Rob into house, beast mode. I would love a lengthy tour of the Hot Toys. Every week you have new Hot Toys box behind you. I just ordered Endgame Thanos. Yeah, I can't wait to get Endgame Thanos. You can kind of see, there's my Thanos right there, my Infinity War Thanos. I haven't put the backings. These shelves I have are see-through, and I put backing on this, and I just haven't gotten around to. I'm gonna do that maybe today, because I haven't finished in this room what I was gonna do. I got posters to put up. I got a painting of the Yamato there that came with a 1/350 scale kit. Yeah, I love Hot Toys, and there's so many of my Hot Toys. It's funny because I got these 2 cases in here. I wish I could fit another one in, but I can't decide. Like, I've got, like, this is all the Avengers, but I got Ultron and Rocket and Groot down there. I can't decide, should I do a Star Wars case? And I don't know, because I'm going to split them up. I don't know. It's hard. I just haven't gotten around to fully turning my set the way I want it. Or my Imaginarium that's in the garage that's too hot to actually film in. Bummer. But yeah, the last time I did a Hot Toys collection video was the 100th episode of Collider. It's on the Burnettwork. You can go see my collection from like 3 years ago on the Burnettwork web channel. On my YouTube channel, the Burnettwork, there is my old Hot Toys video I made. By the way, I stayed up all night and just cut it in like 5 hours. Something. So, Devilman. I like Devilman. Devilman's on, what is it? Devilman. What's the Devilman show that's on the Devilman show that's on Netflix? I forget. Let's see. There's, God, you guys got a lot of stuff going. This is really interesting. Aldo Parenti says, greetings, neighbor. Greetings, Aldo. Oh, Ottervom says, Robot Jocks, directed by Stuart Gordon, who directed Reanimator, starring Gary Graham, who I work with on the Vulcan scene with Axanar. Anyway, you guys, you know what? I got to get off the phone anyway. Get off YouTube. I'm gonna end this chat now. I want to remind everyone that this chat is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products. And you know what? There was a letter here. Actually, I'll read it tomorrow. This chat is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and you punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity Community, you will get 20% off your entire order, which it's pretty great. And I really like their stuff. I'm really enjoying using it. So they sponsor the channel, and I want to thank everybody who sponsors my channel by donating with super chats and all of those things. It's great. You can also go to my website, theburnettwork.net, and become an imagination connoisseur for like $1 per year. That's all you need to support this channel on my website at theburnettwork.net. We're going to start sending stuff out and creating new tiers and doing a lot of cool stuff. But Mike Bodden is in Italy, so we can't until he gets back. But I want to thank all my Patreon subscribers. I'm trying to deplatform myself from Patreon. So if you want to support what I'm doing, go to my website, theburnettwork.net, and send me letters. Send me letters, and you can support me there. That's the best place to do it. But anyway, I'm going to end this chat. I want to thank all of you, these members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. I want to thank Terry and Jim, the moderators, and Greg Smith. I don't know if he's here. And Mike Bodden as well, who's not here because he's in Italy traveling, and posting pictures of Michelangelo's David, things like that. But anyway, I want to thank you guys. I will be back tomorrow at noon, and I will be back on the John Campea show on Monday at 9 a.m. But I thought this was a good show. I really enjoyed all of these topics. Thank you for being here. Go watch Star Trek 3, or better yet, watch Streets of Fire if you've never seen it, because tonight is what it means to be young. I want to thank everybody for being here. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I bid you farewell. I say goodbye. And remember, have a better day.